Right.
Okay.
Because of technical issues, I think we might not be able to take Ahmadine at this point in time, but we are trying to resolve that as soon as possible because we do understand that at the Federal Capital Territory, that is where some form of activity may or may not be happening because of the pandemic.
Yeah, is it celebrations or sober reflection? I think that's one of the big questions a lot of Nigerians both home and abroad, we have to say, because we are also having Nigerians who are tuned in from different parts of the globe, not just in Nigeria, and also the continent of Africa. Well, don't forget, you can follow us on our social media platforms on Facebook and also on Instagram. We're also live on YouTube, as you also watch us on Star Times channels 274 to share your thoughts on what you make of President Buhari's presidential speech and also some of the comments there. So you can go to Facebook and drop some of those comments. We'll be taking them and reading them, some of them out right here on this program, Breakfast Central, as we celebrate Nigeria at 61. Right, let's go straight to Abuja and join our correspondent and Bureau Chief Ahmadine Uyi. All right, looks like we still can't have him. So let's go straight to Facebook and get some of those comments because I don't think Twitter is on. Though Buhari mentioned something about Twitter.
Right. He did mention that if Twitter meets the terms and conditions that have been put by the federal government, then Twitter will be open. But as we speak, we need to be sure if Twitter has met the terms and conditions placed by the federal government. All
right, so let's take some of the comments that we have been getting on our Facebook for you. Quite a lengthy one from the likes of Jibola Olusheye on Facebook. It says, well, the Chinese realize how much later that the best confidence against the enemy is not fortified wall, but a fortified character. Thus, building human character comes before building anything. It says, prayer is not everything. Build relationships and don't ever forget that God will always use man. So he's kind of having a philosophical reflection this morning on our Facebook page.
Right. We also have another message from our Facebook from Information. Now, Information is saying, Happy Independence Day, Nigeria. Happy 61st day. We wish we see better in the better Nigeria. I pray for a Nigeria where I can walk on the streets of Lagos without fears of insecurity.
All right, so we can go to Abuja now, the country's capital. Happy 61st independence to you, Ahmadine Uyi. How are the celebrations or perhaps reflections going on in the Federal Capital Territory?
Well, for the residents of the Federal Capital, the City Center, the independence celebration, for those in the City Center, they have to stay indoors. And for those who have to transmit to the City Center for whatever private work they have to do, it's been very, very difficult. If you look at this side, just behind me here, you see a lot of commuters trekking. This is because the road has been barricaded several kilometers down. So they have to trek several kilometers into the city center. Then if you also look at my left, just down there you see very high presence of security personnel. All these roads lead to the Eagle Square where the president will mark the Independence Day celebration. But I want to show you another picture. If you also come down, look down at this angle. Down at this angle, I hope you can see it because of the sun. You see another police vehicle. Vehicles like this have been mounted at strategic places of the city center, stopping people to access certain areas. So the city center, especially around the Eagle Square, is actually on a lockdown. Though there is very, very sparse movement, several roads have been opened to allow access, but you can hardly see vehicles because vehicles cannot even get to those roads.
All right, Ahmadine. So a high level of security presence in the city center in Abuja. But what have people been telling you this morning, Ahmadine? The people who you're seeing walking around you, what are they saying about Nigeria's independence? What is the sentiment in the capital for people?
Some are excited, some are not so excited. I've spoken, a lot of these commuters who are trekking, they are very unhappy because though today is a public holiday for private people, they still have to come to work. You see one of them just making comments behind me. He's not happy that he has to trek. Those several are still in high spirits. They stay at high spirits. They are believing, they're optimistic, believing that positive things will happen in the future. But others are judging today's independence by the hardship they are undergoing right now.
All right. Thank you so much, Ahmadine Uyi, Chief Bureau Correspondent, all the way from the Federal Capital Territory.
And we have, Foreign Affairs analyst Collins Weke this morning on Breakfast Central. Collins, you're a regular, so let me greet you from brother to brother. Happy 61st Independence, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. We hope that you are celebrating in some sense. So first of all, I'm sure you must have followed Buhari's speech, particularly when he talks about the economy and where we are, particularly with recession. Collins, your thoughts on Buhari, first of all.
Thank you, and happy Independence Day. I mean, no matter what, the 1st of October will always be commemorated. Some will celebrate, others will, use it as moment of reflection. Whichever one chooses, I wish every one of us, Nigerians and friends of Nigerians around the world, a happy Independence Day. President Muhammadu Buhari did what he has to do, which is try to sell Nigeria, try to sell, the projects of the government that he leads. Honestly speaking, he did a very good job at it because anybody who doesn't know Nigeria pretty well, who is not conversant with economic development, the state of the security and all of that, will actually run off, gleaned from Mr. President's speech that we are dealing with a country like, every other country. But that is far from the reality. The reality is that the poverty level in Nigeria has never been higher than it is in the last couple of years. The coronavirus has actually made matters worse, and we know that government did make some efforts to, ameliorate the circumstances of the poorest in the society. But again, that issue that continued to bedevil the country, which is corruption, made it impossible for the support that was meant for the poorest of the poor to actually get to those target group. Yet we have a government that actually came to power on the strength of fighting corruption, on the strength of integrity. Of course, one wouldn't expect Mr. President to actually concentrate on those failures. He is expected to talk about their plans, and those plans are very, very good. Take, for example, I'm talking about the economy. Infrastructure is part of the things that actually, improves the economy. He talked about the resuscitation of, the Presidential Infrastructural Development Fund, which is meant to, take effect in the last quarter of this year, 2021. That is fantastic. But you see, Nigeria and Nigerians are tired of hearing of, policy intentions, right, hearing of policy announcements, and no, Nigerians don't believe any of those anymore until they begin to see them in action, because right, infrastructure is decayed, there is little or no maintenance, and that hampers the economy even further. Right. Now, support for small, look, I can go on and on and on, but I will save you the trouble.
Well, the trouble is that this is Nigeria, by the way, and Collins, nice tie and touch of, the pin there. We have joining us this morning also an economist, Gospel Obele. Gospel, morning to you. Welcome to Breakfast Central on News Central, and happy 61st Independence Day for Nigeria.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me. Happy Independence Day.
All right, Gospel. Now, before we go on, we are talking about the economic situation of the country, judging from the speech that President Muhammadu Buhari gave. But let's just watch this part that focuses on the economy and what he had to say earlier on this today.
Nigeria's roadmap on local refining is on track with the commissioning of a modular refinery in Imo State. A second is scheduled for commissioning by the end of this year in Edo State, and the third one in Bayelsa State by 2022. In addition to the modular projects, we also have the two mega refinery projects coming up in Lagos and Akwa Ibom State. As these refineries are commissioned, more employment opportunities are created, and there would be increased petroleum products available for local consumption, which will significantly reduce our reliance on importation. In further demonstration, our plan to reduce our dependence on oil and tapping from our enormous gas resources, this administration remains committed to the decade of gas. Fellow Nigerians, as our economy continues to open after COVID-19 related lockdowns, we have also seen the resurgence of insecurity in certain parts of the country. In the last 4 months, the gallant men and women of the...
All right, so still following all the breakdown, analysis, and talking points from Buhari's speech this morning as we celebrate Nigeria's 61st Independence Day. Yes, this is Breakfast Central. You are watching News Central. Olisa and Oluchi for you in the studio. We have Collins Nweke, a global affairs analyst, joining us, and also an economist, Gospel Obele. Now, I want to come to you, Gospel. Buhari's speech on the economy touched on so much, from Petroleum Industry Act to the reform, roadmap for refining oil, and also reducing our dependence on oil. Now, that is the good news Nigerians want to hear, don't you think, after 61 years on that crude dependence?
Yes, I agree that's the good news Nigerians want to hear, but still comes up a bit like an old news in the sense, because these are things that could have been done long ago, you know, and being the fact that there are conversations, they're still dragging up to the 61st anniversary, I mean, feels like a shame in a sense, because if you roll back to other presidential speeches, even in past administrations, in previous independence celebrations, you will still hear something similar, as it were. Even the manifestos, you hear something similar. So yeah, it's what Nigerians want to hear. You know, Nigerians are very hopeful people. So it's very easy to sell the idea of hope. All right, but hope itself is very good, but still not a strategy. And in terms of the commitment required, you know, to transit beyond political statements to actions that deliver for inclusive growth.
Right. Now, Gospel, let me still ask you this question. There's been a lot of borrowing from this present dispensation under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari. I mean, just a few days ago, we heard that World Bank has just given Nigeria $750 million loan. Now, what risk is involved in all of this, Obele?
All right, so interesting to note that no nation that has grown significantly into the advanced stage of its economy has done that without a budget deficit in a sense. So from a very surface level, borrowings are not bad. All right, what makes it bad are the nature of spendings or, in quote, investments that these monies are being used for. All right, and if you look at the government budget spread and all that, you can see the heavy weight on debt servicing as well as recurrent expenditure, and little or not much on capital expenditure. Even if you look at the budget implementation reports, all right, over the years, you would see that we usually hit the recurrent expenditure mark and do not even achieve up to 50% of the capital expenditure. So that's to tell you that the risk associated with borrowing is the fact that we do not have productive pipelines through which those monies have gone through such a way that the returns on those investments will be positive enough to secure development as well as to service or repay back those debts. Also, secondly, to note that Nigeria is currently in a tough revenue crisis, and some of these borrowings have been targeted towards core infrastructure projects, which, quite frankly, some of which we've seen. All right, we're talking about the railway infrastructure project between Lagos and Ibadan, and there are conversations that there will be ports projects even within that portfolio and all of that. So the risk it makes in a sense, the next generation of leaders would likely undertake a very huge debt burden that I don't see how possible it will be in terms of escaping that, as well as even the states have their own conversation around need for bailouts and all of that. So it puts the nation at a dire financial and investment risk going forward, and that would be a very bad place to be in terms of attracting foreign direct investment going in the subsequent years.
All right, thank you very much, Gospel Obele. We still have you right here on the program with us, but I want to come to you, Collins Nweke, Global Affairs Analyst. Now, there was not really much said in terms of Nigeria's debt servicing from Buhari's speech, but looking at what Gospel just talked about, it's not how you borrow, it's perhaps the recurrency of how you borrow. And many will say that this administration, well, in terms of, look like addicted to borrowing, just like what you have when people can't stay away from crack or some of those things. But where do we get out of this? How can Nigeria's economy rebound from all this?
Well, first and foremost, I want to look at it from two perspectives. Perspective number one is indeed the attitude of Nigeria towards borrowing. Like Gospel mentioned, borrowing in itself is not a bad thing. As a matter of fact, borrowing can actually be a very, very positive thing. But indeed, what you do with the money that you borrow is, the cardinal point there. Now, that's on the Nigerian side in terms of, being able to, get their acts together as regards to what they borrow for. And I mean, if you are borrowing not to, service existing debt, but to actually increase the productive capacity, well, then you can be sure that the return on investment is going to be high, and then you are not going to run into, trouble, more especially increasing the debt burden on the next generation. So the mentality change and more, strategic economic planning is required on the part of Nigeria. But then on the part of the lending institutions, the World Bank in this instance, also is a question to look at very, very critically, because they don't have any business borrowing when Nigeria cannot show proof that they have the capacity to actually repay. And then the third strand of it is the next generation on whose back these debts are being accumulated. I mean, they need to stand up more than they have ever done before. It's not going to be easy, but this is a burden that they don't have to bear, and they need to be louder in letting the government know that they disagree with this, and government should be more responsible.
He talked really well about the refineries. I mean, he mentioned about 5 states: Imo State, Edo State, Bayelsa State, Lagos State, and Akwa Ibom State, and the plans on how refineries will be brought out from the state. Now, let's not forget, we already have 4 refineries that are more or less not functioning properly. How well do you think we can handle 5 more when we have 4 who have 0 to nothing to prove to us so far? Collins, I won't start with you.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, that's it. It's part of that, lack of adequate planning. I mean, dig deeper, and you might find that, the purpose of the extra refineries that are being talked about, has to do with the fact that it serves the interest of, the ruling class, the elites of Nigeria, who have actually, supported it because ultimately it will pay off to them individually and not, the national economic interest. So yes, I agree with your summation that they ought to inject more capital into the existing ones that have either gone marabout or in fact, that are completely useless. They should do something resuscitating them rather than, establishing new one. That's one. And then secondly, the fact of injecting impetus in the non-oil sector, I think is a very, very important thing that they have always talked about, but never managed to realize. I believe that, such a fund meant for the refineries could be redirected into injecting impetus in the non-oil sector, because the slight growth of the economy witnessed in the last period actually came mainly from the non-oil sector. So I think they should do more work on that rather than the wasteful spending on projects that are due to fail.
Yeah, thank you so much, Collins Wake. But I have to come to you, economics gospel, Obele. So I'll give you the final words on Buhari's points on economic diversification strategy and recovery from the economic recession, which his administration has led us to twice. So far, so good. Your thoughts?
The economy has been recovering quite technically. If you look at the GDP numbers, you see how sectors have been picking up. But significantly, these sectors have picked up because they are largely resilient sectors in themselves. So business activities in those sectors have grown to become more resilient than of taking from a significant government support, all right, in terms of that recovery process in itself. So we've seen that the government needs to rework its social intervention towards recovery to ensure that it's targeted at the critical mass of business who actually needs it. So,
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time this morning, and happy Independence Day 61st for you. Gospel Obele, economist, and Collins Weke, Global Affairs Analyst. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on Breakfast Central on our 61st Independence Anniversary.
Thank you. Happy Independence.
Case has been postponed until the 14th of October, when both the defense and the state will make closing arguments, and then there will probably be a judgment.